strange how the silence of the night can feel like a living thing, breathing, watching, waiting. As I sit here in the dim light of my single desk lamp, every creak of my old house feels amplified, every shadow stretching longer than it should. My parents are away for the weekend, and the house, though familiar, feels like a stranger. Earlier in the evening, I convinced myself that I would enjoy the solitude, a chance to unwind, to dive into my favorite books, maybe even binge-watch a horror series without interruptions. But now, as the clock ticks past midnight, my bravado has wilted. It started subtly, a faint scraping sound, like nails lightly dragging across wood. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was just the old house settling, as old houses often do. But then it came again, this time louder, more deliberate. My heart thudded in my chest as I paused the movie playing on my laptop and strained to listen. Silence. Maybe I was imagining things. I shook my head, trying to laugh at my own paranoia, but the unease remained, clinging to me like a second skin. I decided to double-check the locks, grabbing my phone and using its flashlight to cut through the darkness. The living room was eerily still, the furniture casting grotesque shadows that seemed to shift as I passed. The front door was secure. The windows were locked. Everything was fine, or so I thought. As I turned to head back to my room, my phone's flashlight caught something in the corner of the room. A figure, standing impossibly still. My breath hitched, and I froze, unable to look away. It was tall, gaunt, and cloaked in shadows, its face obscured but its presence overwhelming. My mind raced to rationalize what I was seeing. Was it a trick of the light? An overactive imagination fueled by the horror film I'd been watching? I took a tentative step closer, and in an instant it was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. My stomach churned as I forced myself to return upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. I tried to shake off the encounter, telling myself it was nothing, that I was just tired. But as I lay in bed, the quiet of the house seemed to press against my ears, heavy and suffocating. And then I heard it again, the scraping sound, this time from inside my room. I shot upright, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. The sound was coming from the closet. I stared at the door, the small sliver of moonlight streaming through the window illuminating its outline. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out of the house, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I reached for the lamp on my bedside table, gripping it tightly like a makeshift weapon. My trembling hand extended towards the closet door. The scraping stopped. My breathing was shallow, my pulse erratic. With a sudden burst of courage, or perhaps sheer desperation, I yanked the door open. Empty. My clothes hung limply on their hangers, untouched. The floor was bare, no sign of anything out of place. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I turned back towards my bed, I saw it again. This time, standing at the foot of my bed. Its face, or what passed for one, was a void, an absence that seemed to suck in the light around it. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It reached out a skeletal hand, its fingers unnaturally long and ending in razor-sharp tips. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet and crashing to the ground. My phone skittered across the floor, the flashlight flickering before going out completely. Darkness enveloped the room, and the thing moved closer, its presence almost tangible, pressing down on me like a weight. In the pitch black, I could feel its breath, cold and fetid, on my face. I lashed out blindly with the lamp, connecting with nothing but air. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. The lights flickered back on, and I was alone once more, my room as it had been. I didn't sleep that night or the next. Every shadow, every noise, every flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye set my nerves on edge. Days turned into weeks, and though I never saw it again, I felt it, always just out of sight, watching, waiting. The solitude I once craved had become my prison, the silence my tormentor. And now, as I write this, I realize the truth. It's not gone. It never was. It's here, reading over my shoulder, its whispering breath against my ear, waiting for me to turn around. I always thought the old stories about our small town were just folklore, cautionary tales spun by bored minds, until that night, when I found myself alone, trapped in a nightmare that blurred the line between the living and the dead. It began innocuously enough, with me sitting in my living room, the dim glow of the TV flickering across the walls, the soft hum of its static-filled silence punctuating the quiet of the house. My parents were out for the evening, attending some charity event they'd promised to support, and I had eagerly volunteered to stay home, eager for a rare evening of solitude. The clock read 11:47 p.m., and I was halfway through a bowl of cereal when I first noticed it. A subtle sound, faint but distinct, like the faint creak of floorboards under careful, deliberate footsteps. My spoon froze mid-air, milk dripping onto the table as I strained my ears to listen, my heart skipping a beat. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than the old house settling. But there it was again, closer this time, a slow and measured step that seemed to be coming from upstairs. I swallowed hard, every instinct in me urging caution, but curiosity, or perhaps something more primal, compelled me to investigate. Clutching my phone, its weak flashlight my only source of illumination, I crept up the stairs, each creak under my feet reverberating like a gunshot in the otherwise oppressive silence. The upper hallway stretched before me, shrouded in shadows that seemed to shift and sway, as though alive with a life of their own. My eyes darted to the closed doors lining the corridor, each one a potential hiding place, each one concealing a possible nightmare. My pulse quickened as I reached my bedroom door, the source of the faint creaking now unmistakably emanating from within. The handle felt icy cold under my trembling hand, and I hesitated, a thousand thoughts racing through my mind. Was someone inside? Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? I slowly pushed the door open, my flashlight revealing nothing but the familiar confines of my room. My bed, unmade and strewn with clothes, my desk cluttered with books and papers. I let out a shaky breath, laughing nervously at my own paranoia. But just as I was about to turn and leave, I saw it. The faint impression of footprints on the carpet, leading from the window to the closet. My throat tightened as dread coiled in my stomach like a living thing, my mind racing through possibilities. The window was shut, locked from the inside, yet the footprints were fresh, as if someone or something had just been there. The closet door was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me to step closer. I wanted to run, to bolt out of the house and never look back, but something rooted me to the spot, an invisible force compelling me to move forward. My hand reached out, pushing the closet door open, revealing nothing but a void of hanging clothes and forgotten items. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The faint sound of breathing, soft, almost imperceptible, brushed against my ear, and I spun around, my flashlight swinging wildly across the room. Nothing. The air felt heavier now, thick with an unspoken presence, as though I were no longer alone. I backed away, my eyes darting to every corner, every shadow, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw it, or rather, I felt it. The faint outline of a figure, just at the edge of my vision, standing motionless in the hallway. I froze, unable to move, my body paralyzed by a fear I'd never known before. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, yet its presence was suffocating, an oppressive weight pressing down on me. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving nothing but an empty hallway and the sound of my own ragged breathing. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly dropped it, the sudden vibration shattering the silence. It was a message, an unknown number. The text read, "I see you." My blood turned to ice, and I stumbled backward, my mind struggling to process what was happening. Another message came through, this one accompanied by a photo. It was a picture of me, taken just moments ago, standing in the hallway, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. Panic surged through me, and I bolted down the stairs, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the empty house. I dialed 911, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone, but the call wouldn't connect. Static filled the line, a distorted voice whispering unintelligible words before cutting off entirely. Desperation clawed at me as I reached the front door, my hands fumbling with the locks. But no matter how hard I tried, the door wouldn't budge, as though something, or someone, was holding it shut. The whispers grew louder now, coming from all around me, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. My vision blurred as tears streamed down my face, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the voices stopped. The house fell silent once more, an eerie, unnatural calm settling over me. I turned, slowly, and there it was again, the faint outline of a figure, standing just beyond the edge of the shadows, watching me with an intensity that felt almost human. But it wasn't human. I knew that now. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent, a predator that had been stalking me long before I even realized I was its prey. And as it stepped closer, its form becoming clearer, I understood the terrible truth. There was no escape. Not from this, not from it. It was here, and it always had been, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was its eyes, empty, hollow, and filled with a hunger that would never be sated. I had always been skeptical of the stories, the whispered rumors in our small town about a presence that haunted the lonely, the distracted, and the vulnerable when they were alone at night. People called it the persistent shadow, not a ghost exactly, but something worse, something that wasn't bound by rules or the usual fears that kept the supernatural at bay. I laughed at those tales like anyone else, rolling my eyes whenever someone mentioned feeling watched or hearing things they couldn't explain. That is, until one night when I stayed home alone, the rest of my family away for a wedding I'd opted out of, thinking I'd enjoy the silence and freedom. The clock ticked steadily, the only sound in the house. As I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, the blue light illuminating my face in the otherwise darkened room. It was a mundane, uneventful evening until the first knock came. A soft, almost polite knock at the front door that sent a shiver through me, not because it was loud or ominous, but because it was 1:17 a.m. and no one should have been there. I froze, my thumb hovering over my phone's screen, listening intently as my heart thudded in my chest. I waited, telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination or the wind. But then it came again. 3 soft knocks, deliberate and measured, as if someone wanted to be sure I heard them. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and walked to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but the empty street outside, bathed in the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. No one was there. I exhaled, telling myself it was probably some kids playing a prank, and returned to the couch. But the uneasy feeling lingered, and soon, it became clear that my night was far from over. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "Nice house," it read, and my stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my hands clammy as a dozen thoughts raced through my mind. Before I could respond or block the number, another message came through. "I see you." My breath hitched, and I instinctively looked around, scanning the windows and the darkness beyond them. I turned off the lights, hoping to make myself invisible, and crouched low behind the couch, my mind trying to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was a friend pulling a prank, or maybe it was just someone who got the wrong number. But deep down, I knew better. Then, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, began to echo outside, just beyond the front door. I crawled to the window, peeking out from behind the curtain. There was nothing, no one in sight, but the footsteps continued, circling the house now, crunching on the gravel path in the backyard. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, only to be met with static on the line, a faint, distorted laugh breaking through before the call dropped entirely. Panic set in as I checked the locks on every door and window, double-checking and then triple-checking, but the sense of security was fleeting. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a new sound, the faint scraping of metal against glass, coming from the kitchen. I crept toward the kitchen, clutching a knife I'd grabbed from the counter, and found the window slightly ajar. A window I knew I had locked earlier. My hands shook as I locked it again and pulled the blinds down, but the feeling of being watched grew unbearable. I could sense eyes on me, though I couldn't see where they were coming from. The house felt alive now, every creak and groan amplified, every shadow suddenly menacing. Then a whisper, soft and chilling, came from the hallway. "You shouldn't have looked." My blood turned to ice as I realized whoever, or whatever it was, had gotten inside. I bolted to my room, slamming the door shut and shoving a chair under the handle, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I crouched in the corner, phone in hand, trying the emergency number again, but the same static-filled laugh greeted me. The whispering grew louder, closer, as though circling the room, despite the locked door. "I've always been here," it said, a voice that was neither male nor female, but something inhuman and wrong. The room grew colder, the air heavy with an oppressive presence. I wanted to scream, but fear silenced me, leaving me paralyzed as the door handle jiggled, the chair scraping slightly as if it wouldn't hold for long. And then it stopped. Silence fell once more, suffocating in its intensity. I didn't dare move, my ears straining for any sound, any sign of movement. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell anymore. But just when I thought it was over, my phone buzzed again. A new message lit up the screen. A photo of me, crouched in the corner of my room, taken just moments ago. I dropped the phone, my mind reeling as I looked around, desperate to find the source. There was nothing, no one, but the photo was proof. I wasn't alone. I wanted to run, to escape, but where could I go? The whispers started again, louder this time, as if they were inside my head, mocking me, tormenting me. "You invited me," they said. "You let me in." I screamed then, a raw, primal sound that seemed to shatter the heavy silence, but it was futile. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sensation of hands, cold and clammy, grabbing my shoulders, pulling me into the darkness that had consumed my house, my life, and my sanity. When I woke up, it was morning, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and everything seemed normal. But I knew better. The persistent shadow was still there, waiting, watching, and I knew it would never leave me. Not really. The night began like any other, quiet and still, with the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards keeping me company. I had stayed up late, as usual, scrolling mindlessly through my laptop, the blue glow illuminating my dimly lit living room. My small apartment, situated on the outskirts of the city, always felt lonely at night, but I enjoyed the solitude, or at least I used to. It started innocuously, a fleeting feeling of being watched that I dismissed as paranoia. After all, it was nearly 2 a.m., and my mind was likely playing tricks on me. But then, a subtle sound reached my ears, so faint I almost didn't catch it. The soft rustle of fabric, like someone shifting their weight on the other side of the room. My heart skipped a beat as I froze, listening intently. The sound didn't repeat, and I convinced myself it must have been the wind brushing against the curtains, or some noise from the neighboring apartments. Yet, the unease lingered, a nagging sensation crawling up my spine. I stood up, stretching to shake off the tension, and decided to double-check the locks on my door and windows. A habit I always considered unnecessary in this quiet neighborhood, but suddenly felt urgent. As I approached the window by the kitchen, I noticed it was slightly ajar, though I distinctly remembered locking it earlier. A chill ran through me as I slid it shut, locking it again and peering into the darkness outside. The street below was deserted, bathed in the dim orange glow of the streetlights, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, just beyond the edge of visibility, watching me. I laughed nervously, trying to brush off my growing anxiety, and returned to my laptop, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I lost track of time, but the silence around me felt oppressive, too heavy, too deliberate. Then came another sound, this time unmistakable, a faint tapping on the glass. My blood turned cold as I spun around, my eyes darting to the window, but again, nothing. The blinds were drawn, and the tapping stopped as suddenly as it had started. I debated whether to check or ignore it, my pulse hammering in my ears, but curiosity got the better of me. I crept toward the window, pulling the blinds aside just enough to peek out, and saw nothing but the empty street and the faint sway of the trees in the breeze. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived, replaced by an overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the sudden noise making me jump. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why do you keep looking? You know I'm here." My throat tightened as I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. I typed back, "Who is this? Stop messing with me." Almost immediately, a reply came through, "You invited me in." Panic surged through me as I racked my brain, trying to make sense of it. I hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't let anyone in. The door was locked, the window secure, or so I thought. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway outside my apartment, slow and deliberate. I tiptoed to the door, peering through the peephole, but the corridor was empty. My phone buzzed again. "You're not looking hard enough." My breath hitched, and I felt trapped, cornered in my own home. I retreated to the bedroom, locking the door behind me and grabbing a baseball bat I kept under the bed for emergencies. The messages kept coming, each one more chilling than the last. "You can't hide. I'm closer than you think. Open the closet." The last one froze me in place. My closet door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. I wanted to run, to flee the apartment and never look back, but fear rooted me to the spot. I mustered the courage to approach, bat raised, and yanked the door open. It was empty. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. My phone buzzed again. Wrong closet. My eyes darted to the hallway closet outside my room, the one I rarely used. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Whoever was doing this had been inside my apartment the whole time. Gathering every ounce of courage, I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The closet door was slightly ajar, just like the text had said. My hands shook as I gripped the bat, my breath shallow and quick. I yanked the door open, prepared to fight, but it too was empty. I stumbled back, confusion and terror swirling in my mind. Then, the lights went out, plunging the apartment into complete darkness. My phone buzzed one last time, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. The message read, "I never left." The air grew cold, and a presence pressed down on me, invisible but undeniable. I swung the bat wildly, screaming into the void, but there was nothing to hit, no one to fight. The silence that followed was deafening, and as I stood there in the pitch black, I realized the true horror. I would never see it, never understand it, and never escape it. Whatever it was, it had claimed me, and I was utterly, completely alone. The night began innocently enough, with a cup of tea steaming beside me and the glow of my laptop lighting the room as I scrolled through endless tabs for work I wasn't really in the mood to finish. It wasn't unusual for me to stay up late. Quiet hours where the world felt distant and the solitude of my small apartment wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. But tonight, there was something different in the air. A taut silence that even the hum of my computer and the faint ticking of the wall clock couldn't drown out. I chalked it up to fatigue, the usual tricks the mind plays when you're too tired to think straight. But then, just as I reached for my tea, I noticed something odd on the edge of my laptop screen. A tiny, blinking red that I didn't remember being there. At first, I thought it might have been a reflection, but when I moved my head, the dot stayed precisely where it was. My heart gave a small, confused flutter as I stared at it, realizing it was coming from my webcam. Someone was watching. The realization hit me like a cold slap to the face, and I slammed the laptop shut, my breath catching in my throat. For a moment, I just sat there in the dim light of my desk lamp, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a glitch or a software bug. But as I reached out to disconnect the laptop, my phone buzzed on the desk, making me jump. The message was from an unknown number. "Why did you close the laptop?" My stomach dropped, a heavy weight pressing down on me as I stared at the screen, unable to move. The room felt smaller suddenly, the shadows creeping closer, every sound amplified as though the walls themselves were whispering secrets. I stood, gripping the phone tightly, and scanned the room, half expecting to see someone lurking in the corners. But it was empty, just as it always was. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly, "I've been watching you for a while." My mind raced, trying to piece together how someone could have hacked into my webcam. Was it someone I knew? A stranger? The thought of someone observing me in my most private moments made my skin crawl, and I yanked the webcam off my laptop, throwing it onto the floor. My phone buzzed again. That won't help. I wanted to run, to flee the apartment and get as far away as possible. But where would I go? And what would I tell the police? That someone was texting me creepy messages? They'd laugh, tell me it was a prank, that there was nothing they could do. So instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off all the lights, as if darkness could shield me from whoever was out there. The glow of the streetlight outside filtered through the blinds, casting faint patterns on the walls as I crouched by the window, peeking out cautiously. The street was empty, the occasional car passing by, but no one lingering. I tried to steady my breathing, clutching my phone like a lifeline, when another message appeared, "Check your closet." My blood ran cold, and for a long moment I couldn't move. The closet was just across the room, the door slightly ajar as it always was, but now it felt menacing, a dark void waiting to swallow me whole. "I'm calling the police," I typed back, hoping the threat would scare them off. The reply came instantly, "Go ahead, I'll wait." My hands trembled as I dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect, just a series of dead tones echoing in my ear. Panic surged through me, and I dropped the phone, scrambling to my feet. The closet loomed in the corner, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even though I was alone. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp, and approached the closet, every step feeling like an eternity. I flung the door open, swinging the lamp wildly, but there was nothing inside, just my clothes hanging limply and a few shoeboxes stacked neatly on the floor. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as my phone buzzed again. "Look up!" I froze, my eyes darting to the ceiling where the faint outline of an air vent stared back at me. It was too small for anyone to fit through, but the thought of someone tampering with it sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a soft, almost imperceptible sound came from the vent, a faint scraping, like nails against metal. I backed away, my heart pounding as the sound grew louder, more deliberate. Then it stopped, replaced by a silence so deep it felt alive, pressing against my ears. My phone buzzed once more, the message simple, "I'm inside." A low, guttural laugh echoed through the apartment, sending me into a frenzy. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door, not caring if it made me look paranoid. But as I reached the hallway, I realized the laugh hadn't come from inside the apartment. It had come from my phone. A final message appeared before the screen went black. "You can't escape me." It started as a normal evening, the kind where the quiet was almost comforting, and the ticking clock on the wall was the loudest sound in the room. I had settled into my favorite armchair, wrapped in a blanket, a steaming mug of tea in hand, and the glow of my laptop lighting up the otherwise darkened living room. The world outside my window was a void of black, save for the occasional flash of headlights from cars speeding past on the distant road. My little apartment, tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, felt safe, or so I thought. The first oddity was subtle, a faint buzzing sound, like the hum of a phone vibrating on a distant table. I assumed it was my imagination or maybe my neighbors and brushed it off. But then my own phone lit up, a single notification from an unknown number. "Why don't you ever close your blinds?" My stomach dropped, the warmth of the tea forgotten as the words burned into my mind. Slowly, I turned my head to the large window behind me, the blinds wide open to the night, exposing me to the empty street and the shadows beyond. My heart raced as I scanned the darkness, but nothing seemed out of place. Just the faint silhouette of the trees and the dim glow of a street lamp. Trying to steady my breathing, I responded, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly, Someone who's been watching. I froze, the phone slipping from my hand and landing with a dull thud on the carpet. A wave of nausea hit me as I realized someone might actually be out there, staring back at me from the darkness. Gathering my courage, I stood and approached the window, slowly pulling the blinds shut, the clatter of the slats breaking the heavy silence. I backed away, the sense of being exposed still prickling my skin. I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, my hands trembling with every twist of the deadbolt. I tried to convince myself it was a cruel prank, maybe a wrong number or a bored stranger, but the uneasy feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Minutes passed, then hours, and I tried to lose myself in a book, in a movie, in anything to distract me from the growing dread. But every so often, my phone would buzz, each new message sending chills through me. You locked the window, but I could already be inside. You look scared. Are you scared? Check the mirror. That last message made my blood run cold. I turned slowly to face the mirror hanging above the fireplace, the dim light of the screen casting eerie shadows across the room. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed, but nothing else seemed out of place. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the paranoia, but the next message hit me like a punch to the gut. Smile for me. I didn't smile. Couldn't. My hands gripped the edge of the armchair as I glanced back at the mirror, half expecting to see something there, some shadowy figure standing behind me, but the room remained empty. The silence felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Suddenly, a faint tapping sound echoed from the kitchen, a deliberate, rhythmic knock that sent my heart into overdrive. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy glass vase, and crept toward the kitchen, every creak of the floorboards amplifying my terror. The tapping stopped as I reached the doorway. I flipped the light switch, illuminating the small, empty room, and saw nothing amiss. The window was locked, the back door secure. Yet, the sensation of being watched was overwhelming, like a pair of eyes boring into me from just beyond the edge of my vision. My phone buzzed again. You're so close. My grip tightened on the vase as I spun around, expecting to face someone, anyone, but the living room was empty. The messages continued, each one more cryptic and terrifying than the last. Do you feel it? I'm closer than you think. Turn around. I couldn't bring myself to obey, my feet rooted to the floor, but the urge to look over my shoulder was maddening. Slowly, I turned, the vase trembling in my hands, but the room remained the same, silent, empty, oppressive. My breathing was shallow, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But where? The apartment felt like a trap, the walls closing in, the windows too dark to see through. Then came the final message. You can't hide from what you can't see. The lights flickered, plunging the apartment into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, the screen's glow the only light in the suffocating blackness. My hands shook as I opened the flashlight app, the beam illuminating the narrow hallway ahead. Slowly, I moved, every step feeling like an eternity, the sound of my own breathing deafening in the silence. I reached the bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight scanned the room, casting eerie shadows across the walls, but nothing was there. No one. My phone buzzed one last time. You're looking the wrong way. And then the light went out. It began as an ordinary evening, the kind where the silence of solitude feels more comforting than eerie, and the rhythmic tapping of my keyboard was the only sound to pierce the stillness of my small apartment. My desk lamp cast a faint glow across the room, its light pooling in warm tones that I relied on to keep the encroaching darkness at bay. Outside, the city was muted. A distant hum of cars, the occasional bark of a dog, and the whispers of wind brushing past the windows. I had always loved being alone at night, the way the world seemed to pause and give me space to exist without interruption. But tonight something felt different. There was an unsettling sensation I couldn't quite name, a prickling awareness on the back of my neck that made me glance over my shoulder more times than I cared to admit. I tried to convince myself it was just the residue of too many crime documentaries and unsettling stories I had binged over the weekend. Still, every creak of the floorboards and every groan of the pipes felt sharper, louder, as though the apartment itself was trying to warn me. My unease deepened when I noticed my phone screen lighting up on the table beside me. No sound, no vibration, just a message from an unknown number. "Are you enjoying the quiet?" My chest tightened as I stared at the words, my mind racing to figure out who could have sent it. A prank? A wrong number? I typed back, trying to sound casual. "Who is this?" A reply came almost instantly, chilling in its brevity. "Someone who knows you." My fingers hovered over the screen, and for a moment I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That someone was texting me vague, creepy messages? Instead, I put the phone down, resolved to ignore it, and tried to refocus on my work. Minutes passed, then another message arrived. "It's rude to ignore me." My heart leapt into my throat, and I snatched the phone, my hands trembling as I stared at the screen. "What do you want?" I typed, hoping the sternness in my words would mask the fear bubbling just beneath the surface. The response came swiftly. "To see how far you'll go to protect yourself." A chill swept over me, and I stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor as I scanned the apartment. The doors were locked, the windows secured, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain, half expecting to see someone standing outside, but the street was empty, illuminated only by the flickering glow of a street lamp. Another message buzzed on my phone. "Don't bother looking. I'm already inside." Panic surged through me, and I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy bookend, as a makeshift weapon. My breathing was ragged as I checked every room, every closet, every shadowed corner, but the apartment was empty, or so it seemed. My phone buzzed again, and this time I hesitated before looking, dreading what I might find. The message was a photo of me sitting at my desk, taken from a vantage point that could only have been inside the apartment. My blood ran cold, and I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run as far and as fast as I could, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. Gathering my courage, I bolted for the front door, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I fumbled with the lock, another sound froze me in place. A soft, deliberate knock on the door, followed by a voice, calm and eerily familiar. "Going somewhere?" I staggered back, staring at the door as my mind struggled to process what was happening. I didn't recognize the voice, but there was something about it that felt unnervingly close, as if it had been plucked from my own thoughts. The knock came again, more insistent this time, and the voice followed. "You can't escape. You let me in a long time ago." My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, frantically dialing 911, but the call wouldn't connect. Instead, a distorted voice came through the speaker. "They can't help you now." The room felt as though it was closing in on me, the walls pressing closer, the air thick with an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. I stumbled back toward the living room, my eyes darting around for any sign of the intruder, but the apartment remained eerily still. Then the messages began flooding in, one after another in rapid succession, filling the screen with a stream of cryptic sentences. "I've always been here, watching, waiting. You can't run from yourself." My mind spiraled as I tried to make sense of the words. What did they mean? Was this some sick game? Or was there something deeper, more insidious at play? The lights flickered, plunging the apartment into darkness for a brief, heart-stopping moment before sputtering back to life. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft and measured, but when I turned, there was no one there. And then it hit me, the realization that the intruder wasn't a person at all, but something else entirely. Something that had burrowed its way into my life, unnoticed, and was now revealing itself in the cruelest way possible. The phone buzzed one final time, the message simple and chilling. "You can't hide from the truth." As the lights flickered again and the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, I realized that whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to let me go. It It was a quiet Friday night, the kind that made you feel like the entire world was asleep except for you. But the silence was never comforting. It always had a way of amplifying the smallest creaks and whispers of the house. I had decided to catch up on some work, the blue light of my laptop illuminating the dimly lit room, with the soft hum of an old radio in the background playing static that no station could quite clear. I found the noise oddly soothing, though the persistent crackling seemed to carry faint, distorted whispers if you listened too long. My small house felt unusually still, the kind of stillness that presses on your ears and makes your chest tighten, but I tried to ignore it, focusing on the blinking cursor on the screen. As I typed, a notification popped up on my phone, the screen lighting up the desk. It was an email from an unfamiliar address, the subject line reading, "Are you alone?" My first instinct was to laugh it off as spam, but something about it made me pause. Against my better judgment, I opened the email, finding only a single sentence, "I can see you." My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively glanced at the window to my left. The blinds were half drawn, the faint glow of the porch light barely cutting through the dark. I stood, hesitating before pulling them shut entirely, the thought of anyone looking in making my skin crawl. I dismissed the email, convincing myself it was just a prank or a phishing attempt, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again, this time a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Why did you close the blinds?" I froze, the air suddenly feeling too thick to breathe. My mind raced as I replayed every moment of the night. Had I seen anyone outside? Heard anything unusual? The porch light cast distorted shapes against the blinds, but they were motionless, and the street beyond was eerily quiet. For a moment, I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That someone might be outside, sending cryptic messages? The idea seemed absurd. I tried to go back to work, but my focus was shattered. The radio static grew louder, the whispers within it more pronounced. I turned it off, the sudden silence even worse than the noise. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the front door. My heart pounded as I approached cautiously, every step feeling like a mile. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. The porch light flickered as though struggling against the void, but there was no sign of movement. Another tap, louder this time, followed by a text, "Open the door." I backed away, the phone slipping from my hand and landing with a dull thud on the carpet. My mind screamed at me to run, but run where? This was my house, my supposed sanctuary, now a cage where every shadow seemed alive. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my only source of comfort, and locked myself in the bedroom. My phone buzzed again. "Why are you hiding?" The words felt like a taunt, a game to whoever or whatever was out there. I turned off the lights, sitting in the corner with my back against the wall, the knife clutched tightly in my trembling hands. The tapping started again, but it wasn't at the front door this time. It was coming from the window beside my bed. The blinds were closed, but the faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass sent waves of terror through me. It stayed there, unmoving, as if it knew I was watching, waiting for me to react. My phone lit up once more. "You can't ignore me." The tapping stopped, replaced by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the house. I could hear the crunch of gravel, the creak of the porch steps, the jingle of the doorknob being tested. Whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried to stay silent, every noise amplified in the oppressive quiet. Suddenly, the radio turned back on, blasting static so loud it made me jump. Over the crackling, a distorted voice whispered, "Let me in." I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers, but the line was dead. No dial tone, just silence. A new text appeared, "They can't help you." I threw the phone across the room, the screen shattering against the wall, and tried to steel myself against the growing terror. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a different sound, a low, guttural hum, like a chorus of voices murmuring in unison. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, seeping through the walls, the floor, the very air around me. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head, filling every corner of my mind with an overwhelming sense of dread. The hum grew louder, more insistent, until it was unbearable. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I dared to peek out from behind the bed, the knife still in my hand, but the room was empty. The window was untouched, the door still locked. Had it all been in my head? A cruel hallucination? As I tried to convince myself it was over, a single notification lit up the shattered phone screen. "See you soon." The radio crackled to life one final time, the whispers fading into the static as the room plunged into darkness.